The woman the ocean could not erase. You built a memorial before you checked whether I was dead. Claire Carter's voice crossed the Harbor Crown ballroom just as Richard Bennett raised a crystal glass to celebrate the largest deal of his career. The sentence was quiet, almost gentle, yet every conversation beneath the three golden chandeliers stopped at once. Richard turned toward the entrance, still wearing the practiced smile that had carried him through 8 years of interviews, charity dinners, and public grief. For a fraction of a second, the smile remained in place. Then the glass slipped from his hand. It struck the marble floor and shattered. 200 guests stared toward the woman standing beneath the gold-trimmed archway. Claire was 37 now. Her long blonde hair rested over one shoulder, and her navy dress held none of the glitter Vanessa Cole had chosen for the evening. She did not need glitter. The room already looked at her as though the Atlantic Ocean itself had opened the doors. 8 years earlier, every major news network had displayed Claire Bennett's photograph beneath the same headline: "Pregnant wife missing after private yacht trip." Richard had stood before cameras with red eyes and a trembling voice. He had asked America to pray. He had offered a reward. He had created the Claire Bennett Maritime Safety Foundation and spent years speaking about loss, resilience, and the daughter he claimed he would never meet. Tonight, that foundation was sponsoring the gala where he planned to announce a $1.2 billion coastal development agreement. Beside him stood Vanessa, now his wife and the public face of Bennett Coastal Development. Around her neck hung a silver necklace Richard had given Claire on their 5th anniversary. He had told the police it disappeared with her belongings. Claire noticed it. She said nothing. Camera operators turned away from the stage. Phones rose across the ballroom. A reporter near the front whispered Claire's name as if testing whether it could be real. Richard finally found his voice. "Who are you?" It was the wrong question, and everyone knew it. Claire walked forward one measured step at a time. When she stopped 10 feet from him, she opened her hand. A broken pearl bracelet rested in her palm, its silver clasp darkened by salt and time. Richard's expression changed before he could control it. Vanessa saw that change. So did every camera in the room. "You recognize it," Claire said. Richard glanced toward his attorneys, then toward the hotel exits. For the first time that evening, the millionaire looked like a man who had forgotten his own script. Claire placed the bracelet on the white tablecloth between them. 8 years ago, you told the world the sea took everything from you." Her eyes moved briefly to Vanessa's necklace before returning to Richard. "Tonight, the world learns what you left behind." Near the rear entrance stood Nathaniel Walker, founder of Walker Maritime Technologies. Nate had declined every invitation from Richard for nearly a decade. Tonight he had accepted one, not as Claire's rescuer or spokesman, but as a subpoenaed witness in a federal investigation Richard did not yet know had become active again. Beside Nate stood Margaret Ellis, the former federal prosecutor who had represented Claire since the morning after her rescue. 2 investigators from the Coast Guard Investigative Service watched from separate corners of the room. They had no intention of turning the gala into a trial. Their search warrants were already signed. Their teams were waiting elsewhere. Richard did not know that either. He stared at the bracelet, then at Claire's empty left hand. "What do you want?" he asked. "The truth placed where you put the lie," Claire answered. 8 years earlier, she had wanted only to survive one night. One night at SEA at 34 weeks pregnant. Claire Bennett moved carefully along the Newport Marina while Richard walked several steps ahead of her. He had called the yacht trip a second chance. "One quiet evening aboard the Celestine," he said, away from attorneys, business calls, and the arguments that had filled their home for months. Claire wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe the nursery he had stopped visiting, the dinners he had missed, and the unfamiliar perfume on his jackets could still be explained. Hope can make an intelligent woman negotiate with facts she already understands. Before they boarded, Richard held out his hand for her phone. "The signal drains the battery offshore," he said. "Tonight should be about us." Claire hesitated. After her obstetrician learned Richard planned to take her offshore so late in pregnancy, the doctor had insisted that Claire carry a waterproof personal locator beacon. The device was designed for sailors and hikers. It did not track her heartbeat or monitor the baby. It did one simple thing. When activated, it transmitted a registered distress signal and GPS coordinates to a satellite rescue network. Claire had clipped it inside her maternity coat without telling Richard. She gave him the phone. The Celestine left Newport at 7:15, gliding past harbor lights and expensive homes until the shoreline became a narrow gold line behind them. Richard poured sparkling water into a crystal glass, then disappeared below deck to answer what he called an urgent business call. The route felt wrong. Their usual anchoring point was less than 5 miles from shore, but the yacht continued east into deeper water. When Claire asked the captain where they were going, he avoided her eyes. Mr. Bennet changed the plan. Then Claire heard laughter from the lower cabin. A woman's laughter. Soft. Familiar. Completely out of place. She followed the sound down the narrow staircase, holding the rail as the yacht shifted beneath her. The cabin door stood partly open. Vanessa Cole sat at the polished table in a white cashmere coat. Several documents lay in front of her: a newly purchased accidental death policy, amendments to the Bennet Family Trust, and corporate resolutions transferring Claire's voting rights if she became missing or legally incapacitated. Richard stood beside Vanessa, signing the final page. "Once the board accepts the emergency transfer, you control her shares," Vanessa said. "And the child?" Richard paused. "The trust remains under my authority until adulthood." Claire placed one hand over her belly as her daughter moved sharply beneath her ribs. She backed away and searched for another telephone or radio. The emergency handset was missing from its cradle. A cabinet marked safety equipment stood open and nearly empty. The yacht was now more than 12 miles from Newport. Behind her, the cabin door opened. Richard stepped into the corridor, followed by Vanessa. Neither looked surprised to see her. That frightened Claire more than anger would have. "How much did you hear?" Richard asked. "Enough to know this trip was never about saving our marriage." Vanessa folded her arms, but her eyes moved toward Richard before every answer. "Turn the yacht around," Claire said. "Give me my phone and contact the Coast Guard." Richard remained calm. "You always misunderstand things when you are emotional." Claire had heard the sentence for months, delivered each time like a diagnosis. This time it failed. "I heard you discussing my disappearance." "You heard legal planning." "I heard you discussing our daughter as an asset." For 1 second, Vanessa looked away. Fear, not guilt. Fear of Richard. Claire moved toward the stairs. Richard stepped between her and the control room. "There is nowhere you need to call," he said. Claire felt the locator beacon beneath her coat. She needed open sky for the strongest signal. She turned toward the upper deck. Wind rushed through the doorway as rain began touching the glass. The yacht rose and lowered with the dark water. Claire walked toward the stern rail, pretending she needed air while her fingers searched beneath her coat. Richard followed. Vanessa remained near the doorway, clutching the documents against her chest. Claire found the protective cover on the beacon and pulled it free. She pressed the activation button until a small red light began to flash. Richard saw it. "What is that?" Claire stepped backward. "Insurance." His controlled expression disappeared. He reached for her wrist. Claire pulled away. The pearl bracelet Richard had given her years earlier caught against his cuff and broke, scattering pearls across the wet deck. "Give it to me," he said. "The signal has already gone out." The yacht crossed a rough current. Claire reached for the rail. Richard moved into her path, one hand closing around her forearm. "You can still stop this," she said. "Turn around. Tell the truth. Let me leave with my daughter." Richard looked at her as if calculating the cost. "You would take the company. We built it together." "No," he said. "I built it. You were there." Another wave struck the hull. Claire's heel slipped against the wet deck. Richard still held her arm. For one suspended second, he could have pulled her back. Instead, his fingers opened. The rail disappeared beneath her hand. Cold water closed over everything. Claire surfaced beneath the yacht's stern lights, coughing and calling for help. Her dress pulled heavily at her legs. She saw Richard above her, standing beside the rail. Their eyes met. He could see her. He could hear her. A life ring hung less than 6 feet from his hand. He did not touch it. Vanessa appeared behind him, one hand covering her mouth. She said something Claire could not hear. The Celestine continued forward. Claire stopped calling Richard's name. Every breath mattered now. She kicked off her shoes, pulled the locator beacon from beneath her coat, and held its flashing light above the waves. "Stay with me," she whispered to her daughter. "Stay with me, Sophie." The signal, the distress alert, reached the United States Mission Control Center within minutes. The coordinates were relayed to the Coast Guard and to vessels operating nearby. 3 miles away, A Walker maritime research vessel received the emergency broadcast. Nate Walker was on board testing a new collision avoidance system when the captain changed course. Powerful lights swept across the dark surface while the Coast Guard launched a rescue crew from shore. Claire remembered the beam of light more clearly than the hands that pulled her from the water. She remembered warm blankets, oxygen, and a medic asking her name. "Claire Bennett," she whispered. "Do not contact my husband." Then pain tightened across her abdomen. The rescue team stabilized her until a Coast Guard helicopter arrived. Claire was airlifted to a regional medical center with a neonatal intensive care unit. By the time she reached the emergency department, her body temperature was dangerously low and labor had begun. Sophie arrived before sunrise. She weighed 4 pounds and 1 ounce. Her first cry was thin but determined. Because her lungs were immature, the neonatal team placed her on breathing support and transferred her into a temperature-controlled incubator. Claire saw her daughter for only a few seconds before the nurses moved her through the NICU doors. "Is she alive?" Claire asked. The physician held Claire's gaze. "She is alive. She needs help breathing, and the next few days matter. But she is fighting." Those words became the center of Claire's world. Outside the hospital, Richard was already building another version of the night. He stood at the Newport Marina wearing the same Navy coat from the yacht. Cameras recorded him asking the public to pray for his missing wife and unborn child. He claimed Claire had been emotionally distressed. He suggested she had left the upper deck alone during bad weather. The yacht's security system, he said, had failed during the storm. Claire watched the news conference from a small family room beside the NICU. Richard lowered his head at the correct moment. Vanessa stood behind him wearing Claire's necklace. Claire reached for the remote and turned off the screen. Sophie remained in the NICU for 32 days. Time there moved according to different rules. Progress was measured in grams. A peaceful night meant Sophie remembered to breathe without assistance. Nurses explained each machine before touching her. The monitor tracked her heart and breathing. The oxygen sensor measured how efficiently her lungs worked. The incubator protected her from losing body heat. During the first week, an alarm sounded when Sophie stopped breathing for several seconds. A nurse gently stimulated her foot until she took another breath. Claire's knees weakened. "Premature babies sometimes forget," the nurse said. "That is why we are watching every moment." Claire barely slept after that. She stood beside the incubator with one hand against the clear wall and whispered, "I am right here." Nate visited only when invited. He brought the copied rescue coordinates and the original incident report. He never treated the rescue as a debt Claire owed him. Margaret Ellis, a maritime attorney and former federal prosecutor, arrived after Nate contacted her through a secure referral. Margaret's first question was not about Richard. It was about Sophie. When Claire said her daughter was stable, Margaret opened a legal pad. "Then we protect both of you, and we preserve everything." The sealed statement 6 hours after Sophie entered the NICU. Claire gave her first official statement to Supervisory Special Agent David Mercer of the Coast Guard Investigative Service. The interview took place in a private consultation room. The hospital directory no longer displayed Claire's room. Only designated physicians could access Sophie's chart. 2 security officers monitored the maternity floor. Mercer placed a recorder on the table. "This interview is voluntary," he said. "Your attorney may stop it at any time." Claire stated her full legal name and described the yacht trip from the beginning. The phone locked in the safe, the missing emergency handset, the trust documents, the disabled safety equipment, and Richard's decision not to throw the life ring. "Could he see you in the water?" Mercer asked. "Yes." "How certain are you?" "He looked directly at me." "Did he attempt to help?" "No." "Did Mrs. Cole attempt to help?" "No." She looked frightened, but she stayed beside him. Mercer explained that investigators had already requested preservation of the Celestine's navigation data, electronic access logs, camera system, fuel records, crew communications, and passenger information. But Richard moved quickly. By the time agents boarded the yacht, the primary camera drives had been reformatted. The captain claimed Claire had gone outside alone. 2 crew members repeated nearly identical statements. The emergency handset had been returned to its cradle, wiped clean. The locator beacon proved where Claire had been found. The rescue records proved she had survived. Her statement explained what happened. But prosecutors still lacked independent evidence showing that Richard had planned her disappearance or intentionally left her in the water. Worse, someone connected to the Bennett family contacted 3 hospitals asking whether an unidentified premature infant had been admitted during the night. The caller did not ask whether Claire was safe. He asked whether the baby had survived. Mercer obtained an emergency protective order from a federal magistrate judge. For 14 days, Claire's location, Sophie's records, the rescue vessel's name, and the identities of the medical staff were sealed. The order was later extended after a private investigator using false credentials attempted to access the NICU. The government did not declare Claire dead. A confidential notice blocked the accidental death policy and froze the trust amendments Richard had prepared. But the public knew none of that. To the world, Claire remained missing. Richard used the uncertainty to present himself as a grieving husband. He consolidated voting power through the company board rather than the frozen trust. He expanded Bennett Coastal Development and created a foundation in Claire's name. The criminal investigation remained open, but without the erased records or a cooperating witness, no indictment followed. Margaret gave Claire the choice the law could provide, not the one she deserved. She could return publicly and spend years defending herself against Richard's lawyers while raising a medically fragile baby under constant attention. Or she could remain protected while investigators continued searching for evidence. Claire looked through the NICU glass at Sophie, sleeping beneath a white blanket. "What name can I use?" she asked. "Your maiden name," Margaret said. "Claire Carter. We can request a confidential address and protected records. You will not be legally dead. You will be a living witness whose location remains sealed." Claire signed the order. She did not disappear because she was weak. She disappeared because her daughter had spent her first month learning how to breathe, and Richard had already sent someone looking for her. When Sophie finally left the NICU, she weighed 5 pounds and 7 ounces. Claire carried her through a private exit while Nate waited beside an unmarked car. Richard had taken her house, her public identity, and the first version of the truth. He had not taken her daughter. 8 years of light Claire and Sophie settled in Maine under Claire's maiden name. For the first year, federal victim witness coordinators helped secure their medical appointments, housing records, and school enrollment. When the immediate threat decreased, Claire chose to remain private. She did not spend 8 years waiting for Richard to fall. She spent them building a life that no longer depended on him. Sophie grew from a premature infant into a bright, observant girl who loved maps, sea glass, and asking why adults sometimes made simple truths complicated. Claire never told her everything at once. She explained the past in pieces appropriate to Sophie's age. They had survived a storm. Her father had made dangerous choices. The law was still trying to understand those choices. None of them were Sophie's fault. After Sophie fell asleep, Claire studied maritime safety, insurance investigation, and federal compliance. She began reviewing accident reports at a small legal clinic. She noticed details other people missed: radio logs signed after accidents, identical witness statements, inspection reports altered by companies that assumed families could not afford to challenge them. Within 3 years, Claire helped a fishing family recover benefits an insurer had denied. A year later, her research reopened an investigation into a ferry company that ignored repeated safety warnings. She founded Harbor Light, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping maritime victims preserve evidence before corporations could erase it. Nate provided introductions to engineers and retired Coast Guard officers, but he never controlled the organization. Claire refused to replace one powerful man with another. Harbor Light belonged to an independent trust, with Claire as the protected beneficiary and Michael Carter, her older cousin and a respected compliance attorney, serving as its public executive director. That structure protected Claire's identity and prevented anyone from tracing Sophie through corporate filings. Richard became more successful. He married Vanessa 2 years after Claire disappeared. He expanded Bennett Coastal Development across New England and appeared on magazine covers beside headlines about resilience. At charity events, he spoke about losing Claire and their unborn child with practiced sorrow. The accidental death policy never paid, but he told reporters he had donated every potential benefit to the foundation. Few people understood that the money had never been released. Claire watched only when necessary. Anger was expensive, and she had a daughter to raise. Then, 72 hours before Bennett Coastal Development was scheduled to complete its largest merger, Samuel Price entered the Harbor Light office carrying a dented metal case. Samuel had served as chief engineer aboard the Celestine. Claire remembered him avoiding her eyes near the control room. "I should have come sooner," he said. His hands trembled as he removed an encrypted storage drive. Richard had ordered the yacht's camera system disabled before leaving Newport. But the diagnostic computer automatically created a temporary backup of system events, access logs, and audio from the internal intercom. Samuel copied the data before the drives were reformatted. Richard threatened Samuel's pension and his daughter's medical insurance if he spoke. Now Samuel's daughter was gone, and silence had become heavier than fear. The drive contained the changed route, the removal of the emergency handset, the camera shutdown command, and an 11-second audio fragment. Richard's voice emerged through static. "Once tonight is over, the board accepts the transfer." Then Vanessa asked, "And the child?" The rest of the file was corrupted. Samuel pointed to a server code. The yacht's insurer received a complete diagnostic copy. Their retention contract expires when the merger closes. Margaret filed an emergency preservation motion under seal. A federal judge ordered the insurer to secure the archive and prohibited Bennett Coastal Development from destroying merger-related records. The complete recording changed everything. It captured Richard discussing the trust transfer, Vanessa warning that Claire had seen the documents, Claire demanding her phone, and Richard ordering the captain to continue away from shore. It did not record the moment Claire entered the water, but combined with the locator beacon, rescue coordinates, altered route, missing safety equipment, and witness statements, it transformed her accusation into a prosecutable case. Investigators reopened the grand jury inquiry. Then Vanessa contacted Margaret. The woman he planned to blame Vanessa had spent 8 years believing she was Richard's partner. The merger documents taught her otherwise. Inside Richard's private records cabinet, she found a signed statement claiming that she alone had ordered the camera shut down, altered the route, and created the trust documents without his knowledge. Her signature had been forged perfectly. Richard had prepared a second story. In that story, Vanessa was the only criminal. She sent Margaret an encrypted message and requested a meeting at St. Andrew's Church. Claire agreed only after federal investigators arranged surveillance. Vanessa waited in the final pew wearing a dark coat and holding a brass key. "You helped him erase me," Claire said. Vanessa lowered her eyes. "I know. You stood beside him at my memorial. I know. You wore my necklace while he told the world my daughter was dead." Vanessa's voice broke. "I wanted your life. I did not understand that Richard would destroy anyone who became inconvenient." Fear did not make Vanessa innocent. Claire refused to pretend otherwise. But truthful cooperation could still matter. Vanessa handed over the key to a private records vault, along with internal messages and payment instructions. She agreed to testify without a promise of immunity. Before she could leave, Claire noticed a faint red flash beneath one of Vanessa's coat buttons. "Did Richard give you that coat?" Claire asked. Vanessa looked down. The color left her face. Investigators removed a tracking device from the button. A sedan associated with Richard's private security firm was parked across the street. That discovery gave agents probable cause to move faster. Search warrants were executed at the private vault, Bennett Coastal Headquarters, and the home of the yacht captain. Investigators recovered original payment records, drafts of false crew statements, the forged document blaming Vanessa, and correspondence instructing employees to destroy navigation backups. Prosecutors obtained a sealed indictment but delayed the arrest while teams secured records in 3 states. Claire asked for one thing before Richard was taken into custody: a public correction. For 8 years, he had used cameras to portray her as unstable, missing, and dead. She would not let another corporate statement define her return. The prosecutors refused to turn the gala into a courtroom. Claire agreed. She would reveal only evidence already authenticated and cleared for public disclosure. Sophie would remain in Maine under protection. No child belonged beneath camera flashes while adults answered for their crimes. Nate attended as a rescue witness. Margaret attended as Claire's attorney. The federal agents entered separately. Richard believed the gala would complete his merger. Instead, Claire walked through the doors. The return back beneath the Harbor Crown chandeliers. Richard stared at the broken pearl bracelet on the table. "This woman is not my wife," he told the room. "Claire Bennett died 8 years ago." Margaret stepped forward. Claire Bennett was never legally declared dead. Her identity and location were protected under sealed federal orders. Those orders were partially unsealed this morning. The ballroom screens changed. A court-certified photograph of Claire's locator beacon appeared first, followed by the rescue coordinates and the Coast Guard incident number. Then came a redacted birth record confirming that Claire had delivered a living daughter hours after the yacht trip. Sophie's current photograph, school, and location remained private. Richard looked toward the exits. Fabricated, he said. No, Claire replied. Preserved. A short section of the authenticated yacht recording played through the ballroom speakers. Vanessa's voice asked about the child. Richard discussed the trust. Claire demanded that the yacht turn around. Richard ordered the captain to maintain course. The audio ended before the fall. Claire did not need to add drama. The silence afterward did it for her. Richard reached for the microphone. This is an extortion attempt by people trying to stop a lawful merger. Vanessa entered through a side door with her attorney. She wore no silver gown and no jewelry. The signature authorizing the camera shutdown was forged, she said. Richard prepared it to blame me. I have given the original records to federal investigators. Reporters began shouting questions. Richard's attorneys moved toward him. His phone vibrated repeatedly against the podium. Claire remained still. I did not come here to ask strangers to decide guilt, she said. A jury will do that after seeing all the evidence. I came because for 8 years Richard used this foundation, this hotel, and every camera he could find to tell the world I was unstable and dead. She looked directly at the nearest television camera. I am alive. My daughter is alive. We were never the tragedy he built his reputation around. We were the witnesses he failed to erase. Richard turned away from the podium and moved toward a private exit. No agent stopped him in front of the cameras. The investigators had planned something more useful than a theatrical arrest. As Richard entered the service corridor, he called his chief financial officer and ordered him to remove a backup server from the company's Boston office. The call was captured under a court-authorized wiretap. Agents arrested Richard 23 minutes later in the hotel garage on the sealed federal indictment. At the same time, another team intercepted the server before it left the office. Claire did not watch him being placed in the vehicle. She left through the front doors. Outside, the cold harbor air touched her face. Nate and Margaret walked beside her, but neither spoke. Claire called the secure number in Maine. Sophie answered on the second ring. Did you tell them? She asked. Yes. Did they believe you? Claire looked back at the hotel filled with cameras, investigators, and a lie finally losing its protection. They do not have to believe only me anymore, she said. The record survived. The trial 18 months later, Richard Bennett entered federal court. The gala had not convicted him. Evidence did. Prosecutors presented the locator beacon registration, satellite alert, rescue coordinates, medical records, yacht diagnostic files, altered route, missing emergency equipment, payments to the captain, drafts of coordinated witness statements, and Richard's order to destroy the backup server. Samuel Price testified about the diagnostic copy. Nate described the rescue alert received aboard his vessel. Agent Mercer explained how the original investigation had stalled after the camera drives were reformatted and crew members lied. The captain eventually pleaded guilty and cooperated. He admitted Richard ordered him to continue away from shore after Claire fell and instructed the crew not to call for help. Vanessa testified for 3 days. She admitted helping Richard conceal the trust documents, remaining silent after Claire disappeared, and participating in false public statements. Her cooperation did not erase those crimes. She later pleaded guilty to obstruction and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Claire testified last. Richard's attorney asked why she had remained hidden for 8 years if her story was true. Claire explained the NICU, the private investigator who tried to access Sophie's records, the sealed protective orders, and the missing evidence that had once left her word against Richard's company. I was not hiding from the truth, she said. I was keeping my daughter alive long enough for the truth to become provable. The jury deliberated for 12 hours. Richard was convicted of attempted murder within federal maritime jurisdiction, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, wire fraud, and falsifying maritime safety records. At sentencing, the judge described the case as a calculated effort to turn wealth, reputation, and institutional control into immunity. Richard received 32 years in federal prison. Vanessa received 4 years after the court considered both her participation and her substantial cooperation. The captain received a reduced sentence but lost his license permanently. Claire did not ask the court for cruelty. She asked for accuracy. The civil court dissolved her marriage and confirmed Sophie's inheritance rights. Claire placed every dollar belonging to Sophie into an independent trust that Richard could never influence. Bennett Coastal Development entered court-supervised restructuring. Employees who had no role in the crimes kept their jobs. Verified victims and whistleblowers received compensation from the remaining assets. Vanessa returned Claire's jewelry through her attorney. Claire sold almost all of it to fund Harbor Light's legal program. She kept only the broken pearl bracelet. The 9th birthday on Sophie's 9th birthday, Claire took her to the Newport Pier before sunrise. The ocean was calm, painted gold by the first light. Nate waited farther down the dock, giving them space. Sophie had her father's gray eyes, but nothing about the way she looked at the world belonged to him. "Are you still afraid of the water?" she asked. Claire opened her hand. The broken bracelet rested in her palm. "Sometimes. I thought brave people were not afraid." "Brave people are afraid all the time," Claire said. "They just stop letting fear make every decision." Harbor Light had grown into a national organization by then. Its attorneys helped families preserve electronic records after maritime accidents. Its engineers worked with Walker Maritime to create affordable emergency beacons for fishing crews, ferry passengers, pregnant travelers, and children. The devices did not perform miracles. They did not read 2 heartbeats or promise that rescue would arrive without risk. They transmitted one clear fact: someone is here. The 10,000th Harbor Light beacon had been installed that morning on a rescue vessel operating off the Maine coast. Claire placed the bracelet inside a small wooden box on a memorial shelf Harbor Light had built for families who survived the sea. She did not throw it into the water. The past did not need to disappear to lose its power. Sophie slipped her hand into Claire's. Nate joined them as the sun cleared the horizon. He had remained a trusted friend, a witness, and part of the family Sophie chose, not a reward waiting at the end of Claire's suffering. Together, they walked back toward the city. Richard had spent 8 years protecting everything he owned. Claire had spent those same years becoming someone he could never own again. And somewhere beyond the harbor, a small red light began to flash, not as a symbol of fear, but as a promise that this time, someone would answer.